Good day, ladies and gentlemen. We're back with another book study, another edition of our book study of They've Uncrowned Him. We're going to be talking about the liberal sense of history briefly, because we talked about it a little bit in the interlude I did 10 days ago, 5 days ago, whenever it was, before I went to Montreal. And we're going to be talking about the conspiracy to overthrow the church, the Alta Vendita, which is something many people have heard about. Many people haven't. I'm going to read some text from that because Archbishop Lefebvre includes that in the book as being paramount for understanding what is happening in the church. And we're going to go from there. We're going to get through 2 chapters, maybe 3 today. We'll see how far we are when we get through these couple parts I've mentioned. And we'll go from there. We're actually almost done the book. We're about 2/3, maybe 3/4 done. And so we're moving along. So thank you to everybody. And I'm really happy that people have enjoyed this. And I'm going to work on the Substack page. I've got to investigate the settings and that sort of thing to see how I can make it all as one playlist. I'm sure there's a way to do that. So bear with me there. But thank you to everybody who signed up, and we're going to keep going here. So let's get right into the heart of the book. And just by the way, if you're listening to this on the free preview, you can click the sign up button to become a paid subscriber if you're on the podcast platforms, or if you are on YouTube, you can hear the rest of this. There's a whole series there that you haven't been able to see. So check under the podcast, under the video, for the link to do that. It's pretty self-explanatory. All right, let's get to it. So this is chapter 20 of They've Uncrowned Him by Archbishop Lefebvre. And this chapter talks about the direction of history. We're not going to read a ton of this because, as I said, we kind of talked about this last episode in an interlude I did. And I decided to skip a chapter, not because I didn't think it was important. Everything that Archbishop Lefebvre wrote in this book is important, but it sort of goes into the details of certain liberal actors. You know, he talks about Jacques Maritain, Yves Congar, and a couple others, Lamennais, I think, as well. Very important, but we don't want to get too bogged down with certain details, and we want to understand more the meta process, because those names won't really mean a lot to a lot of people unless they're kind of doing a deep dive into those things, which you can do if you read the book. This is not an audio book. This is an overview of the ideas of Archbishop Lefebvre in this book. And it's the direction of history. So the highlighted parts there, I'll just read the first portion. He says, "For the Catholics called liberal, history has a sense, that is to say, a direction. This direction is imminent. It is from here below. It is liberty. Humanity is urged on by an imminent breathing in the direction of a growing consciousness of the divinity of the human person, setting out in the direction of an always more extensive freedom from all constraint. Vatican II will become the echo of this theory by saying, following Maritain, the dignity of the human person is in our time the object of an ever more live consciousness. Always more numerous are those who claim for man the possibility of acting by virtue of his own options and with all free responsibility." And you can see where that's from. Just to show you exactly, that is from, if we click the footnote there, that is from the Declaration on Religious Liberty, which is in the Second Vatican Council, and that's the preamble. So let's just, and that's, I believe that's Dignitatis Humanae is the actual example. So that's what the document's called. So let's just consider this for a second. So in the mind of the liberal, history has a sense. And there's a reason why they believe this. They look at history in this sort of progressive way, and they believe that basically what has happened is there was this beginning, which was very chaotic and, primordial and all these kinds of things. And then there's this sort of selection of this group of people out of the disastrous nature of mankind. And then they're sort of formed over time. This is the Old Testament. God reveals himself to the Jews and they're the chosen people. And it's a select elite group for a purpose, but then that's sort of extended and the arrival of Christ. And then this goes to all the nations, and then people are formed in Christianity. And then because of this, they set up, the societies that give us human rights and all these kinds of things. And they kind of look at history going from this age of sort of chaos to this continual development. I mean, I talked about this in the preamble last time, if you didn't see it, but they're fundamentally wrong on that. We're going to go to why in the book here, but just from a basic understanding of the scriptures, they're fundamentally wrong on this. Creation was created It began with perfect peace and harmony. So the starting point is perfect peace and harmony and union with God. And there's a falling away from that. The direction of history has not been this progress towards the divine. It's actually been a beginning in perfect harmony with the divine. And then there's been a falling away and a climbing back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, Tower of Babel brought back down, prophets risen up and bringing the people to repentance, then falling back into idolatry. It's actually been this undulating thing. There isn't this perfect, direct line forward that is kind of determinate, is what these liberals basically believe. That view is an evolutionary view. And I don't just mean in the physical, but also in the metaphysical, which we'll discuss here. So before we get these ideas of biological and physical evolution, which are so common under the names of Darwinian evolution and things like that, these ideas about physical nature begin in metaphysical. So there's this notion, and you can see here if we go back to the book, where it talks about, you can see there, I'll put my cursor over it actually, just to make sure you can see it with me. Maybe you can see my mouse moving there. It talks about this direction is imminent. It is from here below. It is liberty. So humanity is moving towards this growing consciousness of the dignity of the human person. And this is a modernist idea. This is the idea that basically what's happening is man is being pulled out of the muck of animality and his primordial chaotic nature, and he's being refined, and history pushes him towards, he marches towards this omega point. And this is the theology of Teilhard de Chardin, who was a terrible heretic of the 20th century. And he talked about the point omega, which was this period where, well, basically he believed in the evolution of matter into spirit. He was kind of a pantheist in many ways. Anyway, he was a terrible heretic. He was a Jesuit. Sadly, there were many good Jesuits at the time, but he was a bad one. And, he viewed Christ as sort of this evolutionary character. He was like the perfect man who had emerged from this long march from the ape-like hominid ways of man towards this refined dignity of humanity. And he even said Christ was saved by evolution. Talk about a blasphemy, but he said that. And this is the view. This is the view behind religious liberty. Because, these modernists and these liberals, and they're often the same, they won't explicitly deny outright in concrete black and white terms the doctrines of the church, or they'll try not to at least. Sometimes they do. But they believe that basically there's this, there's a truth for a particular time, and then over time you have truths that arise that are for that particular time. So, they'll look back at the times of, elitism, they'll call it, or, exclusivism in religion or whatever, and say, well, that served a purpose. But humanity has moved beyond that and so forth. And it's a half-truth in the sense that, yes, God did choose the Jews to be the chosen people for a purpose. And once that purpose was fulfilled, then it extends beyond the Jews. But it wasn't because truth itself changed. It's because it's a plan. And the plan is God's plan. Excuse me. And there are stages that are unfolding in lived time and space by us. And it's gradual for us, but it's not gradual for truth itself. It's not that the truth is growing or evolving. It's that the unfolding of the plan takes time. It's kind of like, the building of a house, it has to happen in stages, but the final goal, the primary goal and the final goal, or the primary cause and the final cause are really the same thing. The full finished thing exists before the thing is made. It exists in form, and then you gradually build towards that state. Whereas the liberals and the modernists, they essentially believe that the form itself changes, if that makes sense. As if God thought, what humanity needs right now is this, and then what humanity needs right now is that, and et cetera. And that's not really how it works. we needed the same thing the whole time. It's just that because of our fallible human nature, there was this march and live time towards this fulfillment of this plan set in place by God, set in motion by God. Anyway, that's what they believe. And this is what you see when you read this preamble to Dignitatis Humanae, and it says the dignity of the human person is in our time the object of an ever more live consciousness. Always more numerous are those who claim for man the possibility of acting by virtue of his own options and with all free responsibility. This is complete nonsense. It's people say, the council can't teach error. This is an error. I mean, this is wrong. I mean, it's just simply not true. And if you look at the citation on the other side of the screen, which I'll read to you if you're just listening to audio, Archbishop Lefebvre writes, "Has there ever been seen in any era of history so colossal and radical an enterprise of slavery as the communist technique of the slavery of the masses? If our Lord invites us to discern the signs of the times, then all the voluntary blindness of the liberals and an absolute order of silence has been required in order that an ecumenical council called together precisely to discern the signs of our time," and he cites Vatican II for evidence of that, "falls silent on the most magnificent sign of the times, which is communism. This silence suffices by itself to cover this council with shame and with reprobation in the eyes of all history, and to show the ridiculousness of the allegation from the preamble of Dignitatis Humanae that I have quoted you." So what he's saying here is, goodness gracious, this statement is written in the 1960s. How on earth can anyone of their right mind say in the 1960s that man is moving towards and ever more conscious of the dignity of the human person? It's simply not true. I mean, at that time, you have how many hundreds of millions of people living under communist rule, indoctrinated with ideas that are completely contrary to that. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, but that's the liberal idea. They're moving towards this progress continually. But that's a misunderstanding and a misreading of history, which we'll see here. And I'll pull the book back up for you. So Archbishop Lefebvre goes on, and he says some other things, and I forgot to highlight this one part here, but he says, history has only one sole law. He must reign. If there's a direction or a goal of history, that's what it is. And he writes, this is then the response to the question posed. What is the direction of history? He says, well, history has no direction, no imminent direction. There is no direction to history. There is a goal of history, a transcendent goal. It is the recapitulation of all things in Christ. It is the submission of the whole temporal order to his redemptive work. It is the mastery of the church militant over the temporal city, which prepares the eternal reign of the church triumphant in heaven. Therefore, faith affirms to us, and the facts show it, history has one first pole, the Incarnation, the Cross, Pentecost. It has had its full blossoming in the Catholic city, whether this is in the empire of Charlemagne or the Republic of Garcia Moreno. It will have its appointed time. It will attain its final pole when the number of the elect is complete, after the time of the great apostasy from 2 Thessalonians. Are we not living this now? He says. He writes, you have indeed understood, I think, from what I have said, that in history there is no imminent law of the progress of human liberty. The point being, when we speak of history having a direction, as if it's on a conveyor belt or something like that, this is wrong. When we speak of history having a goal, this is correct. And it's an extremely important distinction. Think about your life. If you have this idea that your life is on a path, and that path is towards greatness, that doesn't make any sense. If you think to yourself, my goal in life is to do something great, that makes a lot more sense. Because the notion that your life just goes towards greatness as a goal, well, then you can confuse everything you do as being on the path towards greatness. Whereas if you say, my goal is to achieve greatness, which is whatever, accomplishment X. Obviously, as a Catholic, we would believe saving your soul. But let's just use a temporal one. Let's say, my goal is to create a business that provides for my family. And I will know my business provides for my family when I have X amount of dollars in the bank account and X amount of employees, whatever, just making it up here. That's the goal. To get to the goal, you have to choose certain paths. And those paths can go in different directions. And sometimes you have to stop the direction you're on and you have to come back to the starting point. You might have to restart. You might lose your business. You might go bankrupt. You might have financial setbacks because of illness in the family, or any hundreds of things that could happen, all these different things that come up in life. You could have a tragedy in the family and have to stop working for a while. Whatever. You have to move. Like 100 different things happen. It's not a direction. It's a perspective and it's a goal. And it has to be intentional. And it has to be reaffirmed and it has to be reestablished over and over and over again to call yourself back to that point. C.S. Lewis writes, and I'm paraphrasing from one of the millions of things of his that I've read, but he writes that true progress, if we mean going towards the desired end, often means going back to the start. Because if you think about it like this, if your goal is to get out of the woods, if your goal is to get out of the woods, but you believe that as long as you stay on the path, you're going to get out of the woods. Well, if you realize that you're actually not getting out of the woods and you're going deeper into the woods, it's not progressive as if to keep on the same direction, to just keep going on the same path. You actually have to go back to where you started and you have to start again. So there's a big difference between the direction and the goal. The direction of history can be completely flawed. The goal of history must be the establishment of the reign of Christ. And we see this in history. We see the tragedies and triumphs. There has been it has appeared in some ways that there has been some sort of, continual progress towards better society or something like that. Because in reality, what we've seen throughout history is that with the incarnation and with the crucifixion and with the establishment of the church and all these kinds of things, yes, we've seen the transformation of societies that have been evangelized and converted. But the only reason that they appear that they're on a direction towards betterment or goodness or freedom or whatever, adjective or descriptor you want to use, it's because of the goal that was established, which is the reign of Christ. You have to constantly be reaffirming that. Otherwise, you will fall back into chaos, barbarism, paganism, and so forth. And this is the fundamental flaw of the liberal mentality of the direction of history. And this is a major flaw in the mentality of the Second Vatican Council. And the thing is, it's in some ways it is a doctrinal problem in a sense. It is a doctrinal problem in the sense that they're kind of misunderstanding the kingship of Christ. But it's more of a historical problem in the sense that they're misreading history. And this is part and parcel with modernism. And you'll find this if you read Pascendi by Pope Pius X, which I talk about at length in my upcoming book, which should be available to you next spring. So anyway, that's the problem. And it's important to understand this mentality when assessing the views of the church leaders since the council. You find this in John Paul II a lot. And actually, it's worth bringing up a certain part of this. I didn't highlight it, but I'm just reminded of it now. And he has something here from John Paul II. He says, "Our society," declared John Paul II on the occasion of the conclusion of the new Concordat between the Church and Italy, "is characterized by religious pluralism." And he drew the consequence from this: the separation of church and state is postulated by this evolution. Archbishop Lefebvre continues, he says, "At no time has John Paul II passed judgment on this change, either in order to deplore the laicization of society or to simply say that the church was resigning itself to the situation of fact. No, his declaration, like that of Cardinal Casaroli, was made by praising the separation of church and state as being the ideal system the outcome of a normal and providential historical process in which there is nothing to criticize. In other words, long live the apostasy of the nations. In this is progress. Or again, we must not be pessimists. Down with the prophets of misfortune. Jesus Christ no longer reigns. What is the difference? All is going well. The church is, in any case, on the march towards this accomplishment of its history. Then, after all, Christ is coming. Alleluia. This smug optimism amidst so many ruins already piled up, this peculiarly half-witted eschatologism, are they not fruits of the spirit of error and aberration? All of that seems absolutely diabolical to me. Have you ever had one of those dreams where, and you've probably had this dream, it's pretty common, where basically everybody else